are the best decks in Master Duel for the September Duelist Cup. Big dog, we have not done any Master Duel content on the main channel in a while, and that's probably going to change depending on how you react to this type of video. As a Masters player today, I'm going to be breaking down the strongest of the strongest, as well as some really good options of strategies that you could be using inside of Master Duel. Let's go ahead and jump on in. What's going on with ya, big dog? And it is an amazing day for Yu-Gi-Oh! I genuinely hope that your day phenomenal. But if it isn't, don't let what happened at the beginning of your day ruin the rest of your day. I'm not gonna lie, big dog, I am excited to bring Master Duel content back on the main channel. And if you guys want to see more, it's going to 100% depend on you, the viewer. So go ahead and get those likes up, share this video with a friend. Let me know down below in the comment section what I missed, what strategies you hate, and more importantly, what other Master Duel series would you like to see come to the main channel. And in case you didn't know, I have a Master Duel channel. Don't worry, nothing is happening to it. So if you want to see even more content, you can go ahead and check out that channel. This particular video is inspired from the tier list that I did a couple of weeks ago, highlighting Selection Pack Advance of the Great Forces. And this particular tier list is going to give you an updated take after a couple of weeks of being able to play inside of that pack. Now for the criteria, big dog, it is incredibly simple. As a Masters player, I'm going to be giving you my updated take on these particular strategies and how well do I think they can compete. It is 100% going to be based on the Master Duel cards that we have available right now, though I will be giving you information about things that you can take to the TCG, as well as some of the new cards that these strategies might be getting. I will be taking that into consideration as well. Another thing that I will be considering is how much do these decks cost on Master Duel. I think as a Master Duel player, one of the most important things is the price. If it does not justify the price, I think that you should not play the deck unless you absolutely love it. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump on in and start with what is probably considered one of the best decks of all time in Branded. Now, why do I say Branded's one of the best decks of all time? While Branded was never really a over-dominant deck like how Snake Eyes and Tearlament was, this strategy has found a niche in every single format it has been available in. It's a genuine model of consistency, and I think one of the best things about it is that it's one of the most well-designed decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! The only unfortunate thing about Branded is that if you play this deck, your dad probably hates you. But it don't matter, your dad can't hate you if you ain't got one, huh? I think that Branded is easily one of the top Master Duel decks. One thing that I absolutely love about Branded is that the more skilled of a player you are, the stronger this strategy is. And this deck statistically consistently ranks as one of the best decks in Master Duel, hands down. While it may not be getting any direct support in the future, I don't think that we'll touch Albaz lore for a while. I think that this is a solid Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck that anytime fusion cards do come out, we gotta kind of look at it sideways to make sure that it doesn't correlate with Branded. Next is the memes. Memento! Mentos freshen. How did that song go? God, I'm old. Memento is one of the most underrated strategies in Master Duel. It can combo like no other and set up a monster that has 5 negations. The deck can be really crazy. Another thing that I love about Memento is that it's still getting more support, and when Fiendsmith comes out, I think that this strategy will be a complete monster. For right now though, I'm gonna put it in Takes a Good Pipe. The cards that put Memento on the map is the Memento Fusion Monster and Memento Tequila, Techlecula, Tech9, Technique, whatever the fusion monster is, and Memento Sleepy are not yet available in this game. But I think once the meme players do get access to at least those cards, it'll be a viable strategy. For right now, definitely Takes a Good Pipe. Labyrinth, I think that Labyrinth is a solid Yu-Gi-Oh! Strategy overall. One thing that you have to look out for with this deck is that anytime a normal trap card comes out, this strategy probably is going to go bonkers with it, especially seeing that it can search it. Right now in the TCG, one thing that we're dealing with when it comes to Labyrinth is the simultaneous equation cannon card. That card allows you to essentially wipe the whole board like Young Thug been wiping noses. I mean that in his truly humble under God term. Free Thug. If I had to put Labyrinth somewhere on this tier list, I'm actually really stuck. I think it's in the takes a good pilot category. I think some of the biggest problems with Labyrinth is that you have to decide between playing those really powerful cards that almost win you the game going first, but lose you the game going second, and then having a balance of contingency plans to be able to fight back when you're going second. Overall though, I do think that Labyrinth is one of the strongest trap decks in Master Duel right now, so if you genuinely enjoy that approach, then this strategy is for you. Next is Heroes. Boys, my favorite hero growing up was Spider-Man. That man talked smack, he slung web, and he had the baddest in Mary Jane. Lois Lane couldn't hold a candle to Mary Jane, and I don't even know who Batman was dating. And then that's when I started to realize that I was probably closer to Batman because, you know, the whole no parents situation. Heroes feel really close to that particular scenario that I just described. If you get lost in the sauce, Heroes feels like a top tier Yu-Gi-Oh strategy. And to some of the more advanced hero players, it probably is. But when you actually realize the deck, you're closer to Batman. You ain't got no powers. Hell, you don't even have any parents, which I guess the analogy is help. I think Heroes at best are experimental. It's a fairly good strategy, just like how with enough money, I'm pretty sure we're all fairly good heroes, but lacks in those completely unfair cards, like how a hero has unfair powers to make the deck a genuine threat. And I'm not even going to talk about how expensive this strategy is, and that's because if you were considering playing this deck, you didn't care about expense and nothing was going to stop you. Next is Dark Magician. Master Duel did get Yugioh, which is a crazy good Yu-Gi-Oh card. The problem though is that players have figured out how to play Yugioh without playing Dark Magician. Other strategies took your best card without having to play your cards. I'm sure I've seen this somewhere. Yeah, I'm gonna put it in Xbox crossplay off. Dark Magician is way power crept. I need Konami to keep that same energy that they gave to Blue Eyes to Dark Magician when that rollout comes. Next is Red Dragon Archfiend. I think one of my greatest Master Duel accomplishments is not just getting 2 Masters with Red Dragon Archfiend, and I mean pure. I think it was the 56 game win streak that we went with this deck. I have never seen numbers like that, big dog. It was crazy. Everybody was getting clapped up left and right. They call me Black Atlas for a reason. I think Red Dragon Archfiend is Xbox crossplay off. My copium, our copium now. Now, I've talked about this in previous tier lists, but there are players that subscribe to Centurion Red Dragon Archfiend, and while I do think that that strategy could be considered stronger, you're playing a worse version of Centurion. Again, it would almost be like saying Red Dragon Archfiend Snake Eyes. We both know that you're playing a worse Snake Eyes deck, but those be the people that be coping. Those are the people I need on my side, for real. Sword Soul is another casualty. I absolutely love that Sword Soul is very budget and easy to get to. I absolutely hate that Sword Soul cannot compete with the top decks in the strategy. I'm gonna put it in Xbox crossplay off. I think if you have no other options and this is your strongest strategy, it's in the really good pilot range, but then you start to realize that Sword Soul is just so freaking power crept. You can lose to just about anything. You either have to break your opponent's board and hope that they don't have recovery, which most decks have now, or set up a board so powerful they can't stop. And Baron Shishao Blackout is not enough. Blue Eyes White Dragon. Now, people in my last tier list were saying that Blue Eyes needs to be above Xbox crossplay off because Blue Eyes is getting support. Bro, if we ain't getting the Blue Eyes support in the TCG, what makes you think that you're gonna be getting the Blue Eyes support in Master Duel anytime soon? Until then, turn on your Xbox, cut off the internet, win games. Next is going to be Purely, and I think that this is one of the better strategies in Master Duel. Like Branded, this is a deck that has found its way to be pretty good for quite some time. A lot of times it's really hard to deal with an Purely Duel, but I think that's something that players are going to be experimenting more in Master Duel is the Ghost Trick version. The version that allows them to be able to summon Utopia double, and I think that that's really good. The strategy works decently well against hand traps, especially Maxi, and while it does have a skill component to it, I think it's one of the best Master Duel strategies in the game. Now, you would be surprised where I put Chimera, and I gotta say this might be cope, and it's mainly because I'm so used to having to play the lower tier strategies to Masters. Playing Chimera feels like a breath of fresh air. It is a literal breeze. Instead of Fiendsmith, the U-Bell package actually helps you insulate against hand traps, and Guardian Chimera is a crazy good Yu-Gi-Oh card. Now, Chimera, like any other deck, does have its weaknesses, but I think with the upcoming support in Fiendsmith, Apprentice Illusion, and other cards, this is a strategy strategy that at the very worst is really good. Chimera has genuinely put itself in an interesting spot, a deck that not many is prepared for and can easily win games. I think that this is one of those strategies that can compete with the big dogs, kind of like how Pearly can. Rescue Ace is still another one of those top Yu-Gi-Oh strategies. What I love about Master Duel is that unlike the TCG, there are strategies that are still good even after being hit. Like, still ridiculously good, and Rescue Ace proves that. If you're able to resolve the effect of turbulence, more often than not, you win the game. It is incredibly hard for players to be able to deal with that. Voiceless Voice. I think in the last tier list, I had Voiceless Voice that takes a really good pilot. Yeah, I gotta be on drugs because it doesn't take a brain to play Voiceless Voice. I do think that Voiceless Voice is stronger than Experimental and takes a good pilot, but I don't think it's better than really good. Voiceless Voice has opportunities to win games, and once it gets going, it's incredibly hard to stop. But the big problem with Voiceless Voice is being able to get going. I think if you genuinely love rituals, then this is your deck. But other than that, I don't think I would invest the amount of ultra rare gems required to make this strategy. Centurion. In my last tier list, I had Centurion as the big three. I still think that it's a top deck, but after testing with it and playing against it, I don't think it's in the big three. Now, the good thing about Centurion is that, like Voiceless Voice, once it gets started, it's incredibly hard to stop. And a skilled Centurion player, even if they are stopped, they have multiple ways to get back into the game. I also think that shooting Quasar Dragon is one of the most unfair cards in Yu-Gi-Oh's history. Banishing itself and returning itself to the field as activation requirement is ridiculous. This is still one of the top decks in my opinion, just on the outskirts of the top decks in the game. I think that Solomon Great gets a lot of flack. It's still an incredibly good Yu-Gi-Oh strategy, but it's one of those decks that takes a skilled and dedicated player to be able to play. Also, getting max seed while playing Solomon Great feels like waking up and stubbing your toe and then missing when you use the restroom. It is the most demoralizing and painful defeats you've ever seen. Now, this is one I completely got wrong. Fire King Snake Eyes. Holy, I ain't gonna lie guys, I got it wrong at Master Duel. I got it wrong in the TCG, and Master Duel has Fire King Yoconics, which is crazy. This is probably, if not the best, I think arguably the second best deck in Master Duel. Now, it genuinely depends on what you think about Yubel. I personally still think that Yubel is the best deck in Master Duel. It has incredibly strong boards, can be pretty much immune to hand traps at the correct time, flexibility and everything in between, while Fire King has horsepower. Horsepower, hold on, I got horsepower. Technically bird power, but you get my point. Regardless, if there was a big three, I think it would have to go to Yubel and Fire King in whatever order that you want. And the third one we'll talk about a little later. Now, Raid Raptor. I think that Raid Raptor is a little bit stronger in Master Duel than in the TCG, but that's because of the formatting that we're in. I'm going to put it in an experimental. If you summon Raid Raptor Ultimate Falcon with 5,300 attack, you probably win. And by Ultimate Falcon, I mean not the regular Ultimate Falcon. I mean Raid Raptor Rising Rebellion Falcon, the big guy. And I think being able to accomplish this despite being max seed is pretty much a game win. But the problem here is actually getting to that card. You see, Raid Raptors are a really fragile Yu-Gi-Oh deck that, when interrupted correctly, they end on a loss. This is one of those boom or bust strategies, and I think if you're taking that into the Duelist Cup, you're going to experience some really high highs, but at the same time, some incredibly low lows. Now, if you wanted to play an anti-meta deck to ruin everyone's day, Cash Tira is definitely that. I think that Cash Money is one of the most solid decks in Master Duel. Your only problem is going to be consistently getting into the cards that you need. Now, Ice Barriers is a strategy that takes a really good pilot. Summoning Lancia can almost feel like an OTK, but also getting Triple Tactics talent also feels like an OTK. The strategy is really good, has some pretty unfair cards, and has ways to combat things like Maxi. I really like this deck. I was really high on Lightsworn. I put it as the highest in my last tier list. Now I'm gonna put it back down to experimental. After playing this deck for almost 3 straight streams and getting feedback, I think that Lightsworn is at an interesting crossroads. There are times where it feels like Master Duel's algorithm is not agreeing with you and you're drawing wolves and felices. Then there's times where you're at the ultimate high, just destroying your opponent. It feels exactly like Raid Raptor. I don't know how to feel about that. I think if you want to play a mill deck, it's probably best to play Tearlament, and Tearlament is in the big three. Big dogs, you guys seen the World Championships. You've seen the top deck list. Tearlament is here to stay and is still one of the best decks inside of Master Duel. It's kind of ridiculous. But now that the cat's out of the bag, I'm not sure if Tearlaments will hold that placing because a lot of players are starting to use Bystials even more. So it's going to be really interesting to see that while it is a top deck, how stable it is of a top deck now that everyone is going to be playing counters. Ancient Gear was a strategy that I was wrong about. While I did mention that Master Duel and the TCG are completely separate entities, and I also mentioned that Ancient Gear has something that we don't have in the TCG, I still put Ancient Gear at the bottom of the barrel. This deck is Tenpai Dragons at home, except when you don't have Tenpai Dragons, it is crazy good, and that's probably an insane bold take. Ancient Gear is a deck that is built to go second. It does not care about your maxi. It don't care about the board you make. It's here to clap you up and end that game immediately. And I think that easily Ancient Gear is one of the strongest strategies out of that selection pack. Now you guys asked, what do I think about Goaty? I think that this strategy is... this one's tough. At best, it's experimental. Goaty has that thing that once it gets going, it's doing incredible things, but getting going would be the problem. Another one of those boom or bust strategies that can really do well under the right circumstances, but once it gets put behind the 8-ball, it will struggle. Notoria just so happened to get secret support for Ragnaraka, and I already thought that Notoria was pretty good. I mean, it does still have Notoria Sacred Tree at 3. That trap card is crazy. I'm gonna put it in takes a really good pilot. Notoria is a pretty good deck at being able to accumulate boards and build advantage, whether you're playing Ragnaraka, Notoria, Runic Notoria, or a combination of those strategies. It's really good at being able to set the tone of the game and win in that battle of attrition. I think that Beat Trooper Ragnaraka, because Ragnaraka gives support to many strategies, is... okay, it might not be Xbox crossplay off, but it's definitely experimental. The best thing that B-Trooper has going for it is being able to search maxi. That could be crazy, but it almost doesn't matter if the cards you draw don't answer the problem. B-Troopers are insanely undersupported, underrepresented, and need more support to make it stronger. This is what happens when Konami decides to balance an archetype but accidentally make maxi searchable. It gets above Xbox crossplay off, but not by much. I've seen Vanquish Soul. I think that it's one of those strategies that's like Solomon Great, takes a really dedicated pilot to be able to master. Keep in mind, there's still cards like Dimension Shifter, and while Kashtira Fenrir is limited, it still exists. This deck is really good in the correct player's hands and can dominate. I think that the Ogdotic version of the Ragnaraka is also experimental. This deck is pretty solid, but prone to a lot of interruptions. Now, Ragnaraka, Rika, Arrow Mage Plants is incredibly good. The only drawback with this deck is that it takes 5 million years to be able to play. If you thought that the Rika combo was long before, holy, you really gonna have to balance that timer with this strategy. Oh, and then there's still Maxi, but you probably can deck them out with how many special summons you're doing. Trap Tricks Ragnaraka is experimental. So the good news is that it can go second a little better. The bad news is that I'm not 100% sure if it's the Ragnaraka cards are better off suited in some of the other strategies than in Trap Tricks anyways. You're gonna be really surprised where I put Gen X, because it did get a crazy good link monster that allows you to infinitely summon. But the problem with that is that infinite combo loses to any interruption. I'm gonna put it in Xbox crossplay off. There are some really good monsters and some really good extra deck cards for Gen X. It just happens to not work well for Gen X. And Dragons. Dragons, I genuinely want to put into really good. I think that they have solid matchups against Yubel, Branded, Tearlament, and even can go toe-to-toe with Centuria. But I've seen you Dragon players. I'm gonna put it in takes a really good pilot. This deck is incredibly good when you're not going for the biggest play that you see and you're keeping it very even tone. A lot of times when you go first with this deck, you can outright win the game just because you have the ability not to lose, which means that your crackback or your board breaking capabilities means you win the game. And that's all that I have for the Master Duel tier list. I really hope you guys enjoyed, and if you guys want to see more Master Duel content, let me know. And if you want to see a different type of tier list, also let me know. Be sure to check out these videos so I can catch you on the next one.